Hello, everybody.
Morning, how's it going?
Doing well. How is your daughter getting along at university after the first week? Good?
My son's doing okay.
Okay, your son. I thought your daughter was gone. Okay, your son.
It's okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. He's doing okay. The drama of the day is that he dropped his phone in something wet. So we're trying
Oh,
to put it in a bag of rice, and
yeah.
it's just all the little things you gotta, deal with when you're and deal with via remote. So, we're doing our best.
Okay. Well,
But
good.
he no, he likes it. He likes it out there. It's good.
Okay. Um, I'm glad. It's an adjustment if they've never lived away from home and a whole new environment, new lifestyle, new thing. Is it at all? Is it a religious school at all?
It isn't.
Okay.
Yeah, it is it's a school for neurodivergent
Yeah.
populations, and yeah, no, they're very much into diversity and just doing a lot of different things. So
Okay. Well, good. I hope he does well. He'll do well. He'll do well. You brought him up well. He'll do well.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Well, good. So, welcome back. Welcome first time for those who may be here for the first time. This is, I think, our fifth session. And this is also streaming on my YouTube page. Previous classes can be found um, on my on the YouTube page, and it's Rabbi Adam J. Rosenbaum. So the same name that you see here on my on my little square here. That's the YouTube page that you can look up previous classes. And if you haven't been receiving emails from me with either links to specific classes and or resources from other places, resources that we discuss during classes, please feel free to put your email in the in the chat, and I will be happy to include you in future emails. So, good to see everyone. We are just a couple weeks removed from Rosh Hashanah. I mean, it's happening pretty soon, and I thought it would make sense for us to talk about it, and to talk about fall holidays in general. And that'll take us, I think, at least a couple of classes. I do know that when it comes to um uh, you know I keep on thinking to myself, I need to put a syllabus out for this, and then I keep on uh reminding myself that we have to kind of go through this as we go along. So but I can tell you at the very least what the next three main topics will be. We will be doing fall holidays first, which again will take us at least a couple of sessions. Then we'll talk about Shabbat. We'll talk about the Jewish Sabbath and customs of observance, rules for observance, meaning of it, etc. And then we will get into dietary laws. We'll go into matters of keeping kosher and such. So those are all topics that will be done in sequence. Um, I should also mention before we start today that next Sunday I will be in Knoxville, and I will be broadcasting this from Heska Amuna Synagogue, which means that if you would like to join me in person at the synagogue, rather than on Zoom, you may do so, but I will have a Zoom regardless. So, if you can't make it, or if you're too far away from Heska Amuna, that's fine. You can still Zoom in. So, just want to leave as many options available to all of you. Um, Okay, that's those are the basic house bits of housekeeping for the moment. Why don't we jump into it? I don't have a handout or a graphic to offer you at the moment, although I will sometimes utilize a whiteboard to write stuff down. So we might get to that as we go along. But I wanted to start by talking about Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is, better known as the Jewish New Year, and I start with an anecdote from uh, Saturday Night Live. And the reason why I'm starting with this is because I think this was sometime in either the 80s or the 90s where they were talking. They had like a weekend update segment where they say, "We take you now to Times Square, where our reporter on the ground is is going to talk to us about the festivities there for the Jewish New Year." And so they have somebody standing on Times Square, and she's looking at the camera saying, it's just a kind of a normal night. I don't know what you wanted me to talk about exactly." Uh, and the joke being, of course, that anyone expecting for there to be 1 million people out in Times Square to watch the ball drop for the start of the Jewish New Year would have been greatly disappointed. So it describes sort of the contrast.
Yep, you froze up, Rabbi.
It's often understood in the how often the secular New Year is observed. The secular New Year is observed generally with revelry, and pure unbridled uh, joy. And please understand, I'm not saying anything bad about this. I enjoy New Year's Eve as much as the next person. I like to watch the ball drop and enjoy it with friends. It's totally, there's nothing wrong with it. But it is just a contrast to how the Jewish New Year is observed. The Jewish New Year is observed with joy, but with sincerity and with thoughtfulness. The Jewish New Year is not just an opportunity to celebrate the end of one year and the beginning of a new one. It is it is an opportunity for us to really take stock of our lives. Now, I know that with the secular New Year, it's common to have New Year's resolutions. But what do we often discover or say about New Year's resolutions? We often talk about the idea that, well, on January 2nd or whatever it is, or January 3rd, everybody's at the gym. Everybody's, made a resolution. Okay, we're going to exercise more. We're going to, whatever resolutions there might be. And the running joke is that, within a couple of weeks or maybe a month or something like that, for so many people, it's been abandoned. Those resolutions are often kind of made to be broken. Now, all due respect to those who maybe have kept a New Year's resolution longer than that. I know that often, that sometimes people do, but it's sort of the running joke that New Year's resolutions, okay, good luck keeping that for very long. In Judaism, a New Year's resolution, if you will, I mean, though we don't usually refer to them as that, a New Year's resolution is really meant to stick. We're really trying to keep it going as best we can. And they're not just resolutions about, let's say, self improvement, they also have to do with how we treat others and how we observe our religious commitments. Now, all of this, you might imagine, is described in the Torah, right? The idea of the Rosh Hashanah is this time of sincerity and time of uh, rebirth and reassessing where we are. That's all in the Torah, right? No. The Torah tells us very little about Rosh Hashanah. It tells us in the book of Leviticus that it is a day in which you are not supposed to do work. It's a time where you are supposed to sound a horn. It is known as Yom Truah. Truah being a word from Yom being day, Truah being basically a sounding of a horn. So all we really know is that we don't do work on this holiday, and we sound a horn, which could be understood in different ways. You could say, okay, well, that means, you go to synagogue and you sound a shofar. Or you could say, we take the day off of work and we go to the symphony. Which one is it? Well, it turned out that it was the former, but from that's not necessarily obvious from the way it's described in the Torah. This is all to say, basically, that most of what we do in terms of Rosh Hashanah is not described in the Torah. It's described and it's developed by the rabbis, as we've talked about. I know we talked about very much in our third session. We talked about the rabbinic history.
Okay, Rabbi, I have a question.
Go for it.
Then why has it migrated, if you will, over the years to become such a significant time for Jews to show up at the shul if you don't do it any of the rest of the year, et cetera, et cetera?
Excellent question. Why exactly does Rosh? I mean, I'm just going to repeat this or reframe it a little bit, but I will get to it. Why exactly is Rosh Hashanah like one of the holidays for the year? So, and to kind of give this a little more context, there are many Jews in which if they don't go to synagogue at any other time, they're going on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is a week and a half later, which we will talk about Yom Kippur. But how did those become the high holidays?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And and by the way, with all that, the high holidays, I mean, or sorry, if you ask the question, this is something that I always remember learning about. When I was a kid, I was said, they would say, what's the most important Jewish holiday?
Hanukkah.
And Hanukkah, right? Because Hanukkah is so fun, right? And you get presents. Okay.
And we're
Okay.
kids. When we're
And
kids.
we're kids. Yeah, exactly. It's the most important, right? And by the way, Hanukkah's a lovely holiday, and we will talk about that eventually. But no.
I thought Purim was the happiest holiday.
Purim is very happy. Purim is wow. I mean, Purim is it's happy and silly and irreverent, I would say. And again, we will get to that as well, because I mean, Purim's a lot of fun. We have a lot of holidays, as you may know, we have a lot of holidays to choose from. There are plenty of Jewish holidays. But the answer we would often give was Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, right? That's, where, we're really serious and that's the most important, right? The answer is Shabbat. The answer is the Sabbath. So the most important Jewish holiday is one that comes once a week. And of course, as kids would say, that's a trick question. Well, okay, maybe it was, but that really is the case. That's the day par excellence. When you talk about the importance of keeping the Sabbath holy, that one's in the Ten Commandments. The rest of the holidays aren't. That's the one that's described in the story of creation. The other holidays aren't. So, Catherine, I promise you I'm not avoiding your question. What is the most important Jewish holiday? Or how did Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur become the high holidays? I don't think there was any one particular moment, but I do think that the seriousness with which we treat Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that made it evolve into the day that, all right, well, if I'm not gonna miss anything, those are the ones I'm not gonna miss. It's more this idea of, you know, and it's not like a really exciting answer. I mean, it's really more just the idea that um uh, it's sort of, think of it like you're attending class in college, right? You think you're enrolled in a class in college. What class are you least likely to miss? You're least likely to miss the one in which you have the final exam. One would hope, right? That's the one you're least likely to ditch. If anything, you're showing up for the exam. And in a sense, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when paired together, they're kind of the final exam for the year, even though it's the beginning of the year. But it's meant to be, kind of a review of the past year. Now, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur should be understood in tandem. Because Yom Kippur has become associated with the idea of atoning, for apologizing, Rosh Hashanah, being the first day of the Jewish year, became known as the time where we are basically preparing ourselves for Yom Kippur. Preparation is a hugely important concept in Jewish life. We don't just jump into stuff. We have to take time to think, to prepare. And so the idea is that if on Yom Kippur we're supposed to atone for our wrongdoings over the past year, to just go in without any kind of prior thought would not set up for success, would not set us up for success. So Rosh Hashanah, which takes place on the first day of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, whereas Yom Kippur is on the 10th day, so a little more than a week before is the first day of Rosh Hashanah. There are 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, by the way. The first and second of Tishrei, since it is, a little more than a week prior to Yom Kippur, it inherited this dual role of celebrating the beginning of the Jewish year and to start the official countdown to Yom Kippur. So I will actually make use of a whiteboard. Welcome to new whiteboard. How many things do I have to? Okay. 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 So let me just sort of walk you through this. Okay. Rosh Hashanah takes place on the first and second day of Tishrei. Okay. Yom Kippur is on the 10th day of Tishrei. Okay. Sukkot starts on the 15th of Tishrei. Now, we'll talk about Sukkot in a subsequent class. There's a lot to talk about. Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah is on 22nd and 23rd of Tishrei. So Sukkot actually starts on the 15th, but it goes through the 21st of Tishrei. It's a lot of holidays. It's a lot of time to devote to all of this. Those I'm watching on YouTube, I think, can't see this whiteboard. So, so I will, continue to describe things orally if best I can. But what I should note, and this is an important part, and again goes to part of Catherine's question. In the Torah, the major holiday, the holiday that was considered to be, the holiday, it's literally says Hechag, the holiday, is actually Sukkot. Probably not what you were guessing. Sukkot was considered to be the major holiday. Obviously, in terms of length, it is, easily the longest out of all these days. And it also was considered to be like the fall harvest festival, much in the same way that other ancient Near Eastern cultures had a fall harvest festival. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, meanwhile, were other days mentioned, but again, we only have sort of scanty ideas about what you actually find in those days, at least in the Torah. So I know I'm kind of jumping in different places here, but I want to give you as full of a sense of the scope of the holidays before we zero in on individual ones. Does anyone have any questions at the moment? Just feel free to speak up because I can't see your boxes. Okay, all good. So that's what we are. So that's essentially what we're starting with.
Why isn't Passover on your list? I thought that should be, it's pretty important.
Oh, absolutely, it is. Um, I guess I really mean to put it where Rosh Hashanah is, where sorry, Sukkot is the major holiday of the fall. Passover is, the major holiday of the spring. So I should have included that with that.
The one that we just passed, was that Teshuvah? Am I
Ah,
saying that right?
so we had about a little more than a month ago a day known as Tisha B'Av. Uh,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. Oh no, you're fine. All good. Tisha B'Av is the ninth day of Av. It is the saddest day of the Jewish calendar. It's very unique among all the days of observance. Tisha B'Av is certainly something that we will cover at some point because it definitely is important. Um, but Tisha B'Av isn't considered a major holiday, and let me explain why. What's the difference between a major and minor holiday? The difference essentially the difference between major and minor holiday comes down to this question: is it mentioned in the Torah? That's the main question. If it is mentioned in the Torah, it is a major holiday. If it is not mentioned in the Torah, it is considered a minor holiday. That's not to say that minor holidays are of minor importance. They just, in terms of observance and in terms of whether we do work on those holidays, that's the defining factor. All of the holidays mentioned in the Torah contain the phrase "Lo melechet avodah lo ta'asu," or "Kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu." All manners of work you should not do. So if it's mentioned in the Torah, that's part of it. If it's not mentioned in the Torah, you don't have that injunction, "Kol melechet avodah lo ta'asu," so therefore you are allowed to do work on those holidays, and therefore it is considered a minor holiday. So it might surprise you that Hanukkah and Purim are considered technically to be minor holidays. Again, they have importance in their own respective rights. But since you are allowed to work on those days, they're not considered to be as major as some of the ones that we've already talked about. Other questions at the moment? Okay. All right. So stop sharing that. Great. So that's a general overview of the timing of the holidays. So now let's talk about what actually happens on Rosh Hashanah, what actually happens on Yom Kippur, and we'll see how far we get. What actually happens on Rosh Hashanah? Well, Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday. By the way, pardon me for a moment. I actually have to, as you can tell, I'm doing this from my car once again. So I'm going to, I've been turned, my air conditioning has been off for the last half an hour. I'm very warm. I'm going to turn my car engine on. Sorry for a moment. Sweet relief. Okay. So thank you for your patience. Okay. So Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday. It is known by at least a couple of different symbols. One symbol is a shofar. A shofar is literally a ram's horn. It is a hollowed out horn of a ram. They literally do that. Now, while the ram is alive, but yes, they actually hollow it out, and it is sounded as a musical instrument. And we'll talk about the significance of what that is. Yes, Betty and Mark.
Why is Rosh Hashanah a 2-day holiday?
Why is it a 2-day holiday? Very good question. Okay, so we'll back up once again, which is good, by the way. I mean, look, thank you for keeping me, ensuring that certain things are clear and why I'm making sure to clarify these things. Okay. Outside of the state of Israel, of the land of Israel, a Jew observes every major holiday for 2 days, except for one, which I'll tell you in a moment. If you live inside of the land of Israel, you only observe 1 day of each holiday. Now, why is that? Well, in terms of how people would account for time, there was the ancient way of accounting for time according to the Jewish calendar, which is lunar, it goes according to the moon, is that you would have to have experts to determine what phase the moon is in. Jewish months, as I mentioned, go by the lunar cycle. Whenever the moon is new, meaning not visible to the naked eye, that denotes the beginning of a new Jewish month. The thinking goes that the best way to know when the time is absolutely accurate is to measure it when you're in the land of Israel. At least this is the ancient idea behind it. So essentially, somebody would be declaring, according to the moon cycle, as they would detect it, when holidays, when major days were taking place. And the idea is that when you're outside of the land of Israel, you are farther away from those who can make that assessment, and therefore you don't want to play around with what is a with the days. In other words, you don't want to observe something on the wrong day. So just in case, we observe 2 days of that holiday. Given the advent of modern, given modern science, given our advances in astronomy, is this a really silly thing? Yeah, it might be. But it's a tradition that has been maintained by many, I would say most Jewish communities. Rosh Hashanah is one of those days that we observe 2 days. Should we observe major holidays for 1 day? Well, you're going to hear different opinions on it. The conservative movement, the conservative, as we are part of a conservative synagogue, we are, we're ones who do observe major holidays for 2 days. The one exception is Yom Kippur.
Oh,
We observe Yom Kippur for 1 day. Why is that?
because we're fasting.
Yeah. We can't eat or drink on Yom Kippur to make, it's hard enough to make people do that for 1 whole day. Try making people do that for 2 days in a row. Good luck.
Rabbi, also, I don't want to, there is a difference in the level of attendance on day 1 of Rosh Hashanah services versus day 2. Just an observation, not, yeah.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Yeah. Second day of Rosh Hashanah service attendance does tend to go down. And part of the reason is that, honestly, the customs surrounding the second day of Rosh Hashanah are not different enough from customs surrounding the first day of Rosh Hashanah for many people to say, I have to go to the second day of Rosh Hashanah. It's going to be, that much different. It's like we did 1 day of Rosh Hashanah. It's done.
I think
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with modern culture. You can take 1 day off for work.
Right.
But it becomes difficult. As a teacher in Knox County, I got 2 religious holidays. So if one of the 2 fell, if Yom Kippur fell on a Saturday or Sunday, then I was able to take day 1 and day 2 of Rosh Hashanah. Otherwise, I couldn't really do that. And I think
Right.
that's became part of the reason behind me only coming in 1 day.
Sure. And I think that is a major factor is some people who feel like, who not only feel like, but they literally need to go to work. And I, I am sympathetic to that. That can be a real challenge when one has limited time off potentially. Um, uh, this year is especially challenging. Rosh Hashanah begins Monday night. By the way, all of the holidays, in fact, every Jewish day begins at sundown. So, because we're going by the lunar calendar, and we're going by the idea from creation that it is, that it says after each day, it was evening and it was morning. Therefore, we learn that the day begins at sundown. according to the Jewish calendar. So Rosh Hashanah this year begins on a Monday night and extends until sundown on Wednesday. Yom Kippur begins on a Wednesday night and extends until sundown on Thursday. Those are 3 days where you're not able to, those are 3 days of holidays. It could be a challenge. Part of what I try to do is I try to do a couple things a little bit differently on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, so that those who do not have obligations that they can't break can potentially come on the second day. One thing I'm doing is on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, I'm going to lead a discussion rather than giving a sermon. Just going to try that. We'll see how it goes. So want to make it a little different here and there. All right. So, Betty and Mark, are we good? Did I answer okay with the question of why we do 2 days?
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Okay. So Rosh Hashanah, it's 2 days. Um, and so the shofar is one of those things that we are supposed to sound. That's what the Torah tells us. It is a ram's horn. The significance of a ram's horn, why it specifically has to be a ram's horn, it's because of the licensing deal that Judaism has with the National Football League. We have to make sure that the Rams are. No, I'm kidding. So it's because one of the stories that is paramount in the discussion of Rosh Hashanah, for better or for worse, is the story of the binding of Isaac from Genesis chapter 22. That is Abraham's final test, according to the text given by God. And it is the test in which he is commanded to offer his son, Isaac, as a sacrifice, which at the very last moment, God said, don't worry, I'm not actually going to make you do that. It's a complicated story, to say the least. But the reason why the ram's horn gets involved is because when God says, oh, you don't have to do the sacrifice, you don't have to sacrifice your son, Abraham looks around and sees, oh, there's a ram there cut off of over there. Let me sacrifice that instead. And that's what Abraham does. So the ram's role in that story is why we have a ram's horn. A shofar would be sounded is sounded many times on Rosh Hashanah, unless Rosh Hashanah were to fall on Shabbat. In that case, we don't sound the shofar on the Shabbat day that Rosh Hashanah takes place. We would only do it on Sunday, the following day. And now, I would ordinarily be willing to give you a demonstration of how to sound the shofar. I am terrible at sounding the shofar. I'm really bad at it. So I would recommend a couple different possibilities. One is the guy who sounds the shofar on at our synagogue at Rosh Hashanah, a guy named Ken Brown. He's great at it. So I would recommend coming to synagogue or zooming in at synagogue and listening to him. Also, I would say that YouTube would have a lot of different ways in which you can hear somebody sound the shofar. Yep, yeah, Mark.
If you're interested, next Sunday at 12:30, Ken Brown will be teaching how to blow the shofar. So
It's
if
at
you have one,
12:15.
is it 12:15?
Yes, you
Okay.
stole my announcement, Mark. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but go to it. If you have a shofar, bring it. If not, there'll be some extras. So then you can actually not only hear it, but learn it.
And And so in the, and so when the shofar sounded, like I said numerous times, the first time after you hear it, it's customary to say, shofar, so good. No, we actually don't say that, but no, and the shofar is a major symbol of Rosh Hashanah. Another major symbol that you have is that of dipping apples into honey. It's because Rosh Hashanah is being the beginning of a year. We wish each other a Shana Tova Umituka, which means a good and sweet new year. And so sweetness is a major theme for Rosh Hashanah. And it is typical to eat sweet foods, many of them incorporating, if possible, apples and or honey. But one way we do it is we literally take slices of apple and dip it into honey, and then wash our hands a lot because it's really tough to do that without the honey dripping on things. But it's a very sweet treat. So that's a custom with apples and honey. Now, another thing that we try to do on Rosh Hashanah is we try to do something new every year. There's a custom of having, one of the ways that people do it is they say, like, you need to eat a new fruit. By new fruit, I don't mean a fruit that has just been invented in the last year, although food scientists do remarkable things. But we're talking about a fruit that you haven't had before. And if you've tried all the fruit that there is on planet Earth, try a food that you haven't tried before. There are customs that people buy a new, if they can afford to, they buy a new outfit, and wear it on Rosh Hashanah. The idea is to embrace the newness, embrace that which is new, or at the very least, that which is new to us. And a food that is often utilized as one of those new fruits that people offer is a pomegranate. Why a pomegranate? Now, I will say that pomegranate kind of runs counter to the idea of apples and honey. Pomegranates are one of the sourest things that you're ever gonna chew into. I mean, my gosh, it is very sour. But a pomegranate represents something different. The rabbis taught that a perfectly ripe pomegranate has 613 seeds. If you remember from what we talked about, I believe last week, how many commandments are there? 613. And so the idea is that Rosh Hashanah is a time where we make a new commitment to observing the commandments. Now, are there actually 613 seeds in a perfect pomegranate? I've never counted. I think that would be kind of dubious. There are a lot. There are plenty. Yes, Chad and Jetty.
I just have a quick one that's kind of off the beaten path. But when you go before the Beit Din, how well do you have to know each one of the 613?
So honestly, it depends on who is so if one is converting to Judaism, it honestly depends on the who's running the Beit Din and what their expectations are.
Can you request somebody that doesn't expect a lot? I'm just kidding.
I hear you. I hear you. So listen. My approach in conversions to Judaism And by the way, I mean, it is slightly off topic, but I'm happy to talk about it because it's important for people to know, I think. My approach when it comes to conversion to Judaism, I've officiated now a couple of conversions for congregants at yeah, at Heskamuna. There are a couple more scheduled. I've got a couple more scheduled in December. So my goal when doing so is to impart, first of all, the idea that learning about Judaism is a lifelong process. So to expect a finished product at the time of conversion, I think would be unrealistic and counterproductive. So the idea is I want and hope for people to be on a trajectory that embraces lifelong learning. So I also am not interested in doing sort of gotcha questions at a Beit Din. I'm not interested in, it's not the sort of thing where I would look at somebody who is, and by the way, Beit Din, we're talking about the Jewish court that is convened, the court of rabbis or other people qualified to evaluate whether somebody is ready to convert to Judaism. Um, I'm not interested in gotcha questions. I want more of a discussion and and not necessarily sort of a proficiency exam. I do when I work with congregants, I do have them do a quiz prior to the Beit Din, asking 100 questions. And those questions, some of them involve actual, like specific commandments. Some of them involve sort of overall concepts. Those are those, and that quiz is open book and open notes. The idea is, again, not to be like, quick, name me this commandment. It's not that at all. These are not the SATs. These are not AP exams. I'm not, the idea is to welcome and accept people as much as we can, and to see a commitment to learning and living a Jewish life.
So I don't know what Moses was thinking when he received the Ten Commandments.
At least, and I can only speak for myself in how I do things, but that no, you don't need to do that. I think I think what you need to do is um, so in last week's session, one of the things I had mentioned is the idea that when it comes to 613 commandments, it's a big number, and it is there is nobody, there is no Jew who can possibly do all of them. And the reason why I say that it's literally impossible is because some of those 613 laws have to do with the laws of sacrifices, which we are not doing because we don't have a temple. So right there and then, it's literally impossible for us to do this in the absence of a temple. But even then, um, let's say, all right, one of the commandments is to love your neighbor as yourself. Do I do that perfectly? I can't say I do. Does anyone do that perfectly? You know, uh, maybe Fred Rogers did. That's about all. Fred Rogers was a wonderful man, but it's really hard, right? I mean, some of the commandments to do them perfectly. I mean, look, we're human beings. We do them as well as we can. So, um, I'm much more interested in trajectory and commitment than I am in some sort of quixotic pursuit of perfection. Okay. Will, you've had your hand raised. So go ahead.
Yeah, since I went through this back in 1978, I think the biggest thing is depends on the rabbi. Number one is what has to be known, and it's at least with my rabbi, it was not matter. He didn't care if you knew Hebrew or how long it took. The matter was, did he feel like you were had sufficient knowledge? And the biggest test, I think, was your sincerity, that you weren't going to change your mind. This wasn't just, a whim.
Right, right. When I work with conversion students, um, I I tell them that I'm not going to bring I'm not going to bring you to the Beit Din if I don't think you're ready. So the biggest thing is honestly establishing a relationship and a trust with the rabbi or the people you're working with. And to demonstrate again to demonstrate a commitment. In other words, like if there's a conversion, if there's somebody who's converting and I haven't seen them in weeks or months, I'm gonna wonder, are you ready? And that's not a value judgment, and that doesn't mean that they're, I think they're a bad person. Not at all. Not at all. It's just, I mean, you have to show that you like Judaism being an active Jew takes work, takes time. So we want people, if people want to voluntarily be a part of this, I need to show that there's time and there's time and commitment to it all. So, all right. So I think I've explained, or hopefully. But if there are other questions, feel free to jump in on that. Okay, I think I could make it the next 8 minutes without air conditioning. So, anyway, okay. So maybe a smidge more about Rosh Hashanah. So what is Rosh Hashanah like at synagogue? Services on Rosh Hashanah at synagogue, they usually take a fair bit longer than services on, let's say, a Sabbath morning. So now, does everyone come to synagogue for the entire service? I'd love it if they did. People don't necessarily do so. But how long do they last? They last, I would say, like at Hescom, when we try to make ours, I'd say like the Rosh Hashanah morning services, we try to make them 3.5 to 4 hours. And I know that sounds like a long time. It is a long time. There, I will tell you that there are synagogues that it's longer than that. I'll leave it at that. And but why? Why would we? But why make it so long? What exactly are we doing all that time? Well, part of it is that usually the sermon is a little longer than normal, although I try not to overdo that either. But also there are extra prayers, extra blessings, and extra time for individual meditation and thought. The idea is that if you're really trying to rethink the year, rethink what you've been doing over the course of the year, that's not something that's likely to happen over the course of 20 minutes, right? I mean, it takes time to walk through that. But what we are really trying, but I want to kind of go through a symbol that I think is an important one, and that comes from the name of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh means head, meaning it's the head of the year. But another symbol with that is that of a crown. What we are saying in our prayers on Rosh Hashanah is that God is sovereign. God is the sovereign ruler of us all, is what we are trying to communicate. And as God is sovereign, we are speaking of God's sovereignty, and we are saying, and this is where it folds into where it's going to fold into Yom Kippur, which is where we're going to start next week. The idea is that Yom Kippur is when we are judged. And so what we are told is that God, the sovereign one, holds in God's hand. And by the way, I know I'm saying the word God a lot, but I believe in the idea that God is not gendered. So I don't say he or she or something like that. So I know it sounds a little redundant, but it's the best way I can do it. God holds in God's hand a book. And that book is known as the Book of Life. The idea is that on Rosh Hashanah, the Book of Life is opened. And on Yom Kippur, the Book of Life is sealed. Now, does this actually mean that we believe that that during those 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that those 10 days will determine whether we actually live for another year? Is that what it literally means? Some people see it that way. That's not how I like to see it. I see it more with the idea that the commitments we make, the thought process that we can go through, starting on Rosh Hashanah, can change our trajectory, can change the way that we approach our lives over the coming year. For me to say that, oh, I know what determines whether, the day of one's death, it would be, it would be monstrous, I think, for me to say. And I think to say that the way we behave between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur determines whether or not we survive the year, that is, A, way too much pressure, and B, problematic on many levels, right? We haven't talked about the major dilemma of divine justice. But the major dilemma of divine justice, as we have, as many people have posited, is the idea that why do some righteous people suffer? Why do people who are not so righteous sometimes thrive? It's a question that's posited, I think, in every religion, in every philosophy, and I'm not here to say that Judaism has the answer. So rather than trying to solve this conundrum, which we will talk about at some point, but we will talk about that question and some of what Judaism at least suggests about it. But the idea is that if you make good commitments, if you start the year off well, that can go a long way to making our lives just a little better than it might have been already. I'm gonna, for the sake of for the sake of everybody's time, I'm gonna pause it here. We'll stop the class for the day. We will pick this up next week as we talk about the 10 days Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur itself. That's where we'll start next Sunday, which again, feel free to Zoom, but also feel free to come to Heska Muna Synagogue on in person, and I will be there, God willing, in person. As always, feel free to email me with questions, thoughts, concerns, and feel free to watch this again on YouTube.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good day, everybody.
Rabbi,
Bye.
Yes.
you have just a minute.
So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stop this live stream, and then I will restart it, and why don't you go in on the same link, and then
Oh, so I
I'll
go out and come back in.
go out and then come back,
Okay.
and then I'll talk.